Dear Mr. X, it's me, Samantha. As you know, we've been friends for many, many years, and we've discussed dreams and nightmares countless times. Unfortunately, these talks have almost always been one way, because for some reason, no matter what I do, I've always had problems remembering my dreams. In fact, for most of my life, I didn't think I was capable of dreaming at all. However, I recently had a dream that seemed so real, and which I remember so vividly, I had to reach out and share it with you. Looking back on it, it feels less like a dream and more like a vision of a very possible future. Something like this has never happened to me before, and to be honest, I hope it never happens again. At least, not if the future is as grim a place as it seems. I know you prefer your stories with scenes to be set, so I will oblige. This happened a couple of weeks ago as of the time of this email. On this particular day, my husband was away on a work trip, and our kids were spending the night with my parents. The house was unusually quiet. It had been a while since I had had the house all to myself, so I was enjoying the serenity. Not that my kids are crazy or anything, but you know what I mean. By the time I went to bed, I was almost in a zen-like state of relaxation. As usual, no matter how good my sleep is, I found myself waking up again in the early morning hours. This time around 5 a.m., unable to fall back to sleep. This happens to me all the time. I decided to make use of my insomnia by grabbing my tablet and researching some educational materials for my kids. About a half an hour later, I finally felt the sleep returning, so I quickly shut down the tablet, pushed it onto the nightstand with a drowsy hand, and laid my head back on my pillow. I was back to sleep within seconds. A few minutes later, my sleep was disturbed once again by the sound of laughing coming from the living room just outside my bedroom door. As my mind searched for an explanation, I thought that couldn't be the kids. But as I pondered, unwilling to get up and investigate, I figured my parents may have had some reason to come over so early. After all, they did have a key, as well as a code for the alarm system my husband installed. Still, I thought, they would have called me if something was happening to let me know they were making the drive back with the kids so soon. Either way, I convinced myself everything was okay, that my parents just brought the kids home early for some good reason, so I let the sleep take me once again. As you know, Mr. X, I am a very light sleeper. What felt like just a couple minutes later, after I heard the laughing, I was again awakened by the sound of my bathroom faucet running just down the hallway past my closet doors. At first I told myself it was just a trickle, that it would probably stop on its own, another ploy for me to stay in bed. When the faucet continued to sound, I forced myself to get up and investigate. It was at that moment when the first inklings of fear crept into my mind. My instincts told me to move quietly and carefully as the word intruder bounced around in my head. As I walked down the short hallway, hugging the wall, I saw the shape of a woman holding a toddler. I got closer and saw there were also two small children standing near the sink, looking as though they were washing their hands. Despite how benign the sight of a mother and 3 young kids was, I still saw them as intruders. The thought crossed my mind, even, that they might have been ghosts. It sent chills down my spine when I asked myself if I was living in a haunted house. At some point, that fear turned into anger and I decided to storm into the bathroom and confront the woman. I yelled at her to get out of my house, suddenly feeling no sympathy for the children or anyone else. I just wanted them out. The woman scooped up her 3 kids and scrambled out the door into the living room. When I followed them into the living room to make sure they had left through whichever open door or window they came, I paused. For some reason, the room seemed immediately different to me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It was all so familiar, but somehow not at the same time. It's hard to explain. The woman had ran to a group of people who were standing in my patio with the large sliding doors wide open. The people were quick to console her and listen to the woman's panicked ramblings. My husband and I never, ever open the doors like that because it feels like the whole neighborhood is watching us. As I looked around, The kitchen bar counter had trays of food lined up on heating elements, the way a lot of families do on Thanksgiving. People were scattered throughout the open dining room and den areas, and somehow, our den was no longer filled with the gym equipment my husband has collected throughout the years. I walked over to the kitchen and quietly scanned the line of people waiting to get food from the counter. I kept asking myself, who are all these people in my house? What in the world is going on? My eyes met with those of an older woman standing in the line. Her eyes were big, dark, and experienced. She stared at me silently, watching. Before long, she left the line and walked up to me. I felt myself recoil from her a bit, and for the first time, I noticed my feet weren't on the ground anymore. I seemed to be floating somehow. As she got closer, I felt an unmistakable sense of peace and calm emanating from her. The old woman reached out her hand and placed it near where my shoulder was, guiding me toward the front door of my home. As I went, I looked around. On the walls, where I expected to see our family photos, were pictures of people I'd never seen before. I turned my attention back to the older lady when she spoke. As we walked through the front door, she said, "This house was owned by a policeman who was convinced it was impossible to find a better deal on a home in this nice little area." She spoke with a faint smile on her face. We were outside under the front porch by this point. The sun was shining, and all of a sudden it hit me that this was no longer my home. I wondered if my husband was the older gentleman that the woman said had sold the home. If that were the case, I must have died. I felt a combination of shock and sadness overwhelm me at the same time. With tears in my eyes, I apologized to the old woman for causing such a stir in the house. I turned away from her and began to cry. A few seconds later, I finally truly awoke from my sleep, still feeling heaviness in my heart. The whole thing felt so real, it left me questioning if I had really been dreaming at all. It felt like so much more than a dream. Greetings, friends. Mr. X here. Thanks to Samantha, one of my best and oldest friends, for sharing her story with us. She also composed the music you heard in the background. I also want to thank this video's sponsors, Ellie, Dr. Cal, Zucker, and Tariko. Now, I've got a few comments about the story. Number 1. A great teacher once asked his pupil, "Have you ever had a dream you were so sure was real? How could you tell the difference between the dream world and the real world?" Perhaps you know the feeling he spoke of. Transitioning in and out of consciousness over and over again can make the mind malleable. As a result, it can become harder to separate realities. When this happens, who's to say what our experiences truly mean? Imagine a world where this mental state can cause someone to slip from one timeline to another, or to get a glimpse into the future, a peek above the waters of the river of time. Such an interesting thing to ponder. Number 2. The insightful older woman who was able to bring peace to Sam's apparently disembodied spirit. I wonder, what did she see when she looked at Sam? Did she see an apparition? Or simply sense a presence? Or was she just a dream character, a placeholder, to help Sam's mind make sense of everything? The lady said the home was sold for a good price by a man who was once a police officer. Sam's husband was a police officer as well. Perhaps he couldn't bear to live there after his wife passed away. This idea touches me deeply. You'll find out why if you keep listening. Number 3. Shadow people, ghosts. I've discussed these so many times on my channel, but when I think about them, especially with my skeptical mind, there are so many aspects I consider. What if when we see or experience these entities, we're actually seeing the dreams or after images of past or future people? And lastly, number 4, I've felt the sensation of dying and being a ghost, trying to communicate with people. But in the dream I had, I was well aware of my condition. The way Sam had to slowly piece together the nature of her predicament made things a bit more sad to me. To tell you the truth, this is one of my favorite and most deeply personal stories I've ever talked about on this channel. If you're still listening here, you're exactly the kind of curious mind I'm looking for. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss a rare drop. Oh, and by the way, there's a secret you might not have known about Sam. I wasn't lying when I said she was one of my best friends. She's actually my wife, which means the older man, the former police officer who sold the home to the nice family, was none other than my future self, Old Man X. Makes the story hit home quite a bit harder, doesn't it? Now you know why I feel the way I feel about it. That being said, today's code word is Old Man X. Write it in a comment down below so I can see you. Until next time, my dear friend, I'm Mr. X, and may your nights be full of dreams. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, don't forget to like and share. If you made it to the very end, you're exactly the kind of subscriber I'm looking for. Don't forget to turn on those notifications. That way, you can catch the live show and discuss the stories with me. Your input might even appear in my next video. Last thing, if you heard a code word after the story, type it in a comment down below so I know who the real dreamers are. Take care, my friend. Until next time.